As a result of Cyclone Eloise that hit Mozambique mid-January, large parts of the country experienced above-average rainfall. Although Eloise mostly affected Mpumalanga, Limpopo and KwaZulu-Natal, the rain resulting from the storm filled up the Vaal Orange integrated river systems and the country's largest dams in the Northern Cape, Free State and Northwest provinces. The full dams created spectacular sights in the usually arid Northern Cape, while the rain brought color to the landscapes that have been released from the grip of a 6-year-long drought. By mid-February, the Northern Cape received an average rainfall of 300 millimeters in some places, and social media was buzzing with photos of waterfalls, full rivers, dams and streams. The high water resulted in the opening of sluices at the Vaal Dam to make space for more water.
Standing here, witnessing the power of this water coming out of the Vaal Dam, it's just absolutely breathtaking. This is what 130,000 liters passing through these sluice gates every second looks like.
But while the high rainfall has many excited, it has others worried as more rain can lead to floods. Climatology professor Francois Engelbrecht says despite Cyclone Eloise, a second tropical storm hit Mozambique after Eloise, and more storms are likely this year.
We are experiencing a season during which we see many tropical weather systems forming in the Mozambican Channel. Now that is something that doesn't happen every year. These systems can indeed cause catastrophic flooding and also flash flooding.
Over the last 10 years, we've seen an increase in tropical storms as a result of global warming. The risk here is not the frequency at which they occur, but rather their intensity. Adding more water to already saturated dams, rivers and soil has many concerned over government's flood readiness plan.
Flooding is already happening. The big challenge for us is to make sure that that flooding does not get worse.
Executive Director of AgriSA, Christo van der Rede, says organized agriculture has been in continuous communication with government after many farms, especially in the lower catchment area of the Orange River, already flooded as a result of the cyclone.
If they predict a lot of rains, then the dam managers will normally release water before it causes major damage, because there's no use you wait until the dam is entirely filled up and now you have to release water on a big scale. That leads to serious problems lower down the river system.
The Vaal and Orange River catchment area covers 48% of South Africa's surface, and not only are farmers in these areas on high alert, but many players in the tourism sector are losing out on an entire season of river-based tourism. Packing up his adventure camp amidst the fully booked high season at Onseepkans at the Orange River in the Northern Cape, Andrew Keller says he's facing a loss of income of more than 2 million rand.
As you can see, the camp is pretty flooded at the moment. I personally think this could have been avoided by pre-releases.
Keller's counterparts on the Vaal River also cancelled various trips.
Perhaps, as they know a lot of water is coming into the dam, the time to open some of the gates is earlier, when the flow can still be controlled. And if the dam is about 80–85%, they could let a lot of that water go because there's more water coming in.
Professor Graham Addison has been operating a river rafting business on the Vaal for 20 years.
One of the dangers on this river, as you can see, there are lots of trees. And for a person to get into one of those trees is bad news. So we stop rafting at 850 cumecs.
Water flow is measured in cumecs. 1 cumec equals 1,000 liters of water per cubic meter per second. This means a flow of 8.5 million liters a second, way too fast for river rafting, especially for amateurs. But Addison says the rise in water levels from the open sluices attracted many thrill seekers, and rescue operations had to be performed.
So the raft's going to come in here. Stay where you are, stay where you are. Don't worry about the boat.
Rivers and dams are rising exponentially, and while some people may wait for the water levels to rise before they have a fun day out at the river, safety instructors warn not to underestimate rivers as currents change drastically during high water levels and floods.
With more rainfall expected, increased water volumes are not only dangerous for rafters, but farmers fear a repeat of the floods of 2011, and at worst, the flood of 1988. A farmer from the Uppington area says he was 11 years old when the 1988 floods occurred.
I remember that we went to bed after the first water started to come into our lands, and waking up the next morning and everything was on the water. So that was a very scary sight to see. After the floodwaters was gone and we could go back into the vineyards, I will never forget the look on my dad's face when he see all the destruction that was caused by the floodwaters.
In 1988, the Orange River reached peaks of 7,400 cubics per second. That means nearly 7.5 million liters of water flowed per second past a specific point. The highest peak the Orange River reached so far this year was just below 3,000 cubics. Fourie says although the Vaal Dam sluices were opened, Gariep and Van der Kloof dams should have been opened before they reached full capacity.
We asked for something similar about a month ago in the Orange River, also to create some space for the rain that is coming.
The Department of Water and Sanitation says the decision to release water from the Vaal Dam was done as precaution to prevent floods lower downstream in the wake of the second tropical storm.
We release water from the Vaal Dam into the system, further to the west, towards Bloemhof Dam and into the Northern Cape, so that we can bring relief to the Vaal Dam to make way for the expected inflows from the activity coming through the Mozambican Channel.
If a flood occurs, another major concern for farmers around the lower Orange River is the collapse of flood walls, erected to protect close to 30,000 hectares of farmland.
These flood walls were erected in the 1950s, and we have requested the Department of Agriculture to make money available so that we can maintain those walls. And that was after the 2011 floods that we have experienced. The department made approximately 1.2 billion rand available. But we have now discovered that most of that money was spent, but there's approximately 300 million that was still left.
The Northern Cape Department of Agriculture says all the work was completed, but farmers say there are gaps of 70 kilometers that occur in the 400-kilometer-long flood walls.
A chain is only as strong as the weakest link. So if there's a gap in a wall and the water goes in, you will have water behind the wall, and that will cause a lot of damage.
In a written reply, the Northern Cape MEC of Agriculture, Mase Manopole, said a team of her department's engineers were instructed to inspect the flood walls.
Manopole says that the funds were utilized and that the walls were upgraded. She says that the outstanding walls were in areas that were not surveyed and there was no cost attached to them. She added that the responsibility of the walls is also up to the landowners.
Grape farms around the lower Orange River contribute nearly 2 billion rand to the GDP, creating more than 30,000 jobs. Farmers will rely heavily on early water releases as the flood walls are unlikely to hold during a flood.
More rains are expected. We are on alert as well because those more rains that come in could cause floods. That is why we have to manage our infrastructure and manage how much water we have in the infrastructure in order to take away the risk of the flooding.
Dani van der Spey retired at the end of January as Specialist Engineer in Flood Studies for the National Department of Water and Sanitation.
I don't think the people should be too worried about what's going on at Waterface. They know what they're doing. We rely on the instruments and the flow measurements at the weirs.
For 27 years, Van der Spey was the man making the decisions on when to open the sluices at the country's main dams.
Some people are concerned. They say that water should have been released from the dams already. What would you say to that?
You can't create a flood that's bigger than the natural flood would have been. And the second important one is you can't create a flood prior to that flood occurring in the river.
Protecting the integrity of the dam walls, ensuring the safety of people and maintaining the dam levels at 100% are all priorities when managing water, says Van der Spey. He added that it has never been necessary to open sluices at the Gariep or Van der Kloof dams.
The Vaal Dam and the Bloemhof Dam are both earth-fill embankments, which means that they have an earth wall and should not be allowed to overflow. And that's why water is released through the sluices. Gariep and Van der Kloof, however, are concrete structures where water can be released through natural overflow.
And although 6 sluices at the Vaal Dam were open, taking the risk of opening more sluices can result in empty dams if the rain doesn't come.
We don't anticipate floods. We start reacting when the rain is falling and when we see flow in the river. That's the only way that we can operate these dams.